Welcome back, everyone. Conklin and Company continues now with our Washington Bureau Chief Jacqueline Policastro has an update now on her series of special reports she brought you on the sex trafficking issue here in Northwest Ohio and across the country. Jacqueline, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. You attended a hearing this week, we understand, on Capitol Hill where lawmakers really grilled experts with questions about our country's sex trafficking problem. And as I said, across the country and very close to home here. What'd you find?
Yeah, well, Lee, I've told you about what the Senate's doing, but this is a new House measure. And I went to a hearing. There was a victim there, an FBI officer there, a police officer who deals with crimes against children, and also a judge. And something that they all had in common in their testimony is that they say that this is a growing problem in the U.S. Right now, we know that human trafficking is a $9.8 billion enterprise in the United States. And, you know, it's something that is really hard to track. There aren't a lot of statistics about right now. And so that's why there are so many different people coming together to try to bring their knowledge to lawmakers as they work on legislation to combat this.
Oh, that's a mind-boggling number, $9.8 billion. But this really comes down to victims. And I understand you talked to a victim after the hearing. What was her story, her advice?
Well, Lee, I talked to a victim. She goes by the name of T, and she has been at several hearings on Capitol Hill. And her story is a tough one. She was trafficked from when she was 10 years old until she was 17 years old. And she was inside the Child Welfare Service. And that's actually a point that a lot of different people are looking at right now who are studying sex trafficking, because statistics, the ones we have anyway, show that many of the youth who are being trafficked do come from the Child Welfare Service. You know, she had been in jail several different times, so her testimony was really very unique. Afterwards, several of the lawmakers came up to her to commend her for the work that she's doing to try to speak out on behalf of victims.
This seems like an age-old question. We as a society prosecute the victims and the pimps, but not the Johns, the people who actually buy the sex. What's the response to that? I'm sure that was brought up.
It was brought up several times, especially from lawmakers. T mentioned it as well, though. She said in her experience that, you know, she was brought to jail, that the pimps who were working with her, if you will, were brought to jail as well. But how come the men who are buying sex aren't prosecuted? It's a question that I've asked several attorney generals in the past, and it's one that I really haven't ever gotten a straight answer to. The answer has been that's just how we've done things. And it's something that I think lawmakers are finally realizing needs to happen in order to curb this problem.
How's this playing out on the internet? We have heard so much about how this is the place where this crime often begins. What are lawmakers doing about that?
Yeah, Lee, it is often the place where this crime begins. Several different lawmakers have signed on to a letter to Attorney General Eric Holder asking him to shut down that website, Backpage.com. It's one of the worst. But many of the FBI agents that I talked to say that there are more than 100 other websites similar to Backpage.com that they've found in the past several years. And the thing that's tricky about this is law enforcement, they use these sites as a way to sort of find and help some of the child victims, but they also need to stop the sites from existing because it's just making the crime easier to commit.
All right, our Washington Bureau Chief Jacqueline Policastro following up on her series Sex Trafficking Exposed. If we can, Jacqueline, let's switch gears totally here, talking about the auto industry. New auto caucus being set up on Capitol Hill. Who's running that? What's the goal?
Yeah, well, I sort of been bugging lawmakers about information on this for the past several months, and I finally got some this week. It was finally announced that there will now be a Senate auto caucus. There is already an auto caucus in the House. The Senate caucus will be co-chaired by Senator Rob Portman and Senator Carl Levin from Michigan. Senator Sherrod Brown is also signed on as well, and just to mention when it comes to Ohio, of course. But when I asked the senators why they're doing this now, why is this now the time, they basically told me that right now Ohio is second in the nation when it comes to the automotive industry, and they want to make sure that they're watching out for what needs to be done to keep it that way.
And no surprise that Portman and Levin are going to chair this caucus with Ohio and Michigan. No surprise there, but what's the caucus going to look like? How will they meet? What will they do?
Yeah, well, Lee, it's all about trade, transportation, and technology. That's what lawmakers tell me. And one of the questions I asked them, is this going to be behind closed doors? How are we really going to find out what you're looking at when it comes to legislation or just the impact on our local communities? And they said that they're going to try to make this happen in the public. They're going to try to have some public hearings, even though the event this week was closed to the press, the first event anyway. So basically, they're trying to gauge what the communities need, what the companies need. So it seems like they're going to be working with a lot of the higher-ups in these organizations and companies and wanting to hear from the workers on the ground about what the reality is inside many of these places. But Senator Portman said to me that he thinks that Toledo, Ohio is on the forefront when it comes to creating jobs and keeping the auto industry alive, especially when it comes to Jeep. That's what he said.
Yeah, no question. Jeep hiring 1,000 part-time employees because the full-time employees need a break. They can't build enough of those Jeeps fast enough. All right, Jacqueline Policastro joining us on two fronts. Thanks very much for the update. We will see you next time. Our Washington Bureau Chief. Thanks, Jacqueline. And when we come back in just a minute, Take 3, Conklin and Company continues right after this.